All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. Good morning. I am Kelly Blankenship from Ignite Consulting Partners. With me today is Managing Partner Richard Hudson. We're going to be talking about your risk in social media advertising. All right, so we're going to be talking about today what are triggering terms, what are trigger terms, when to use those triggering terms. We're going to take a look at some deceptive advertising, some advertising that is actually compliant, and then we're going to talk about some compliance risks, risk assessments, best practices, and we're going to touch on some of the legal aspects with the AGs here.
You see the ads. Low price, low payments, no interest, zero down, guaranteed trade-in offers or rebates. Sounds good, but when you get to the dealer, there could be a catch. To get the low price you saw advertised, you might have to make a big down payment or pay extra fees. What about that 0% financing? It turns out you might need a sky-high credit score to qualify. And the extra low monthly payment? Maybe to start, but it could balloon into a much bigger payment later on. Learn as much as you can about a dealer's reputation ahead of time. And when it's time to sign a sales contract, make sure the deal and terms you agreed on are in the contract. You're in the driver's seat. If you can't get the advertised deal or one you feel good about, just walk away. If a dealer isn't honest when it comes to its car ads, let the FTC know. Want to know more? Visit ftc.gov/cars.
Basically, they're asking consumers, they're educating consumers, and they're asking consumers to let them know when dealerships are not advertising compliantly. Some of the dangers that we're seeing out there is that the FTC went after over a dozen dealerships in Operation Steer Clear, and they got them for deceptive marketing and advertising. They followed that up very quickly with Operation Ruse, which they hit an additional 6 dealerships, and that cost them $2.6 million. Because they had deceptive marketing and advertising that was happening.
Yeah, these are not, kind of pie in the sky hypothetical situations. They're actually going after dealers and they're enforcing the law, and there are stiff financial penalties. So.
Very stiff, very stiff. The state regulators are hot all over it, so the AGs are coming after you. So you just want to make sure your advertising is top notch. More than one of the regulators are stating that they don't even have to leave their offices because of marketing that's going on Facebook, on Craigslist, Twitter, Snapchat. They can do it all from their desk.
Yeah, aside from so many other violations where they actually have to be on site, right? They just sit in their office and they can just click through ads and Google for ads. And whatever you're saying, it just pops up, and they love it. They
Yep.
never have to go anywhere, never have to talk to anybody. You're literally putting yourself at risk just by publishing that information.
Yes, yes. And all 50 states have legislation for advertising that forbids any deceptive marketing. The biggest thing that we want you guys to take away from here, from this, is also that other dealers are turning in dealers. So if you have a competitor that's down the road and you're doing it, right or wrong, if a dealership is doing it right, they'll turn in a dealership that's not doing it right.
And that's a common complaint. I'm in the field a lot, and they've got maybe 3 other lots right down the street from them. And when we talk compliance and we say, well, here's the things you should and shouldn't be doing, the complaint is always, well, my competitors aren't doing it. I'm doing the right thing here, and I'm at a competitive disadvantage. Okay, so my advice is to do the right thing, but the next step is, well, how do I get them to stop? Right? And so dealers actually are calling in anonymously and turning each other in because they don't feel like it's a level playing field if other people aren't following the rules.
All right, so ABCs of advertising, it's really, really simple. If you have a dollar sign, a percentage, the number of payments, or the term, those are all triggered. You have to have disclosures included with them. And I have deceptive in here as my C because that triggers your UDAP and your UDAP with the 2 A's. Direct personal contact is also considered advertising. So if they're talking on text message or messenger or through the internet, if they're talking about a deal, that's also considered advertising. So be careful and understand what your salesmen and employees are doing. So just to kind of get an understanding of what we're talking about. So advertisement is a notice that is designed to attract public attention or patronage. It includes all of these things: electronic ads on the internet, newspaper, magazine, flyers, if you're sending out flyers and leaving them in laundromats or other establishments. Those are also advertisements. Do you have any control over those? So make sure you understand what's going out of your dealership. Like I said, the direct personal contact is any contact that's any kind of follow-up contact, talking about the cost estimates, any oral written communications that are relating to the negotiation of the transaction. So if they're talking price, if they're talking about the car, then that can be considered an advertisement. And everybody has it on text message and nobody deletes anything. So, make sure you've got solid text messaging routines. This is the actual definition out of Reg Z for advertising and what triggering terms are. And I just kind of threw in here, here's your ABCs. You've got the months and the years, you got the dollar sign, you got the percentages, so you've got all of those. So it's really simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be simple. And so that's what that is. Just note that if the down payment applies, the rules around the down payment only apply if you're financing something that you're selling. And y'all are selling something, so it applies. Here's some examples of what we see almost all the time. We see, only 5% down. Well, that's triggered. We see as low as $100 down. Well, that triggers something too. The one that gets me is this $800. It can be $800, it could be $200, it could be $2,800. That's all it says. And then it's got a picture of the vehicle and maybe the make, model, and year of it. And that's what it is. My son came to me recently, and he's a college student, and he's like, "Hey, Mom, this is a great deal. I've got this Jeep is like $800." And I'm like, "Yeah, not so much, not so much." That's deceptive marketing. And he's like, "Well, what's that?" And I'm like, "Well, that's probably the down payment." He goes, "No." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's text them." And so we did. We clicked the little icon, and we started messaging them. And sure enough, it was a down payment. And so, and then I asked them, "Well, is this a dealership?" Because it was on a personal Facebook. And so they're like, "Yeah, this is a dealership." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So even my son, he didn't know anything, and we just kind of clicked through it and walked through it, and I showed him what it can be, and it's that easy. So when we talked about earlier that the AGs are sitting in their office, that's what they're doing. They're clicking, and they're texting you, and they're messaging you. So they have a case right there. So just be careful. The finance charges, so, we see it, $500 the cost of total credit. What does that mean? Does that mean all your fees? Does that mean all of the financing? Does it mean all of the warranties, the service contract? What does it include? You haven't said anything. So triggering term, so when you've said something about a dollar sign, a percentage, a term, then you also need to include in your advertisement the annual percentage rate. You can use APR, absolutely fine. You have to include the repayment terms, so if it's 24 months, if it's 36 months, if it's 72 months, you have to include that. If there's a balloon payment, or if you're using the, what was it, the
irregular payments.
Irregular
Similar balloon
payments, like for the
tax refunds.
Tax
For
refunds?
instance, if you're building those into the average monthly payment amount, and it assumes that you're going to have a $2,000 payment in February 2020 and a $2,000 payment in February 2021, that those are also required to be disclosed.
And an easy way to remember this, if it's going to be in the TILA box, and you've got to disclose it in the TILA box, you're going to have to disclose it somehow in your advertisement. It also needs to have the percentage or the amount of the down payment. And again, I just want to say that the down payment applies only if you're financing something you're selling. Y'all are selling something. The ads must be clear and conspicuous, so they can't be hard to read, they can't be in small print, they can't, if you have something disclosed, it has to be in close proximity. So you have this $200 here, it says down payment right next to it. So it's clear, they see it, so it was triggered, that $200, they see it.
Yeah, that's a best practice, just in good disclosures. You don't have a comment up here with an asterisk, and then the consumer has to scroll down 10 screens to read in tiny print at the bottom what that meant up there. That's not clear and conspicuous.
Yes. So then, number of payments, you got to have your repayment period, the amount of payments, so you just have to kind of watch that. The AGs have all stated that personal Facebook pages are prohibited. So they are saying you cannot use a personal Facebook page of your own to sell your vehicles unless you disclose that it's a dealership, that you're working for a dealership. So make sure your sales guys, if they're blasting out these social media sites, make sure that they are including your dealership name so they know it's a dealership. The top bullet here is that the Washington AG, state AG, hit Facebook for marketing practices. And everybody uses Facebook. This was actually for mortgages, but because everybody uses it, I wanted to bring this up to you. Facebook was adding advertisements on their social media site. When somebody was adding an advertisement, they would additionally go in and bifurcate it out to, well, I only want to send it to this zip code. I only want to send it to these white females. I want to send it over here to this community. So even though you thought you were doing the right thing by putting it up on Facebook, and it goes to everybody that you know, and if it's public, then it goes to everyone, it's really not. So you need to know what the third party, what their practices are when you're putting up an advertisement, to actually right and see how it's then being communicated out to the community that they're doing.
Yeah, what methodology are they using to determine what target market to identify? How are they identifying that target market through there? What filters are they using? And is there any opportunity to potentially discriminate against a protected class? And I think that's what they were getting at here with the filters that Facebook was providing. That although you didn't go literally just pick, oh, I want a white guy and I want you couldn't literally pick it, but you could pick other factors that pretty much guarantee that you were only picking these certain classes of people. And so that's what they really had issue with.
Yes, absolutely. Facebook allows you to advertise. They don't charge you for advertising, but they do ask you to use one of their preferred vendors. And we're going to get into that in just a second here. Watch who's posting ads. Make sure they're posting them. Is it an employee? Is it a third party like a lead generator or an influencer? Make sure what you're asking them to put out there, they're actually putting that out there, because they could change your ad and you not know it. Make sure that Craigslist also prohibits personal advertisement. So if it's not saying your dealership, again, Craigslist is not a place to go if you're not including your dealership. Here's an example of Deceptive ad. So it's got the make, model, year. We've got the famous $300. It says warranty and service contract. I'm so stoked because this is $300 and includes all of this. I'm like, fantastic. Well, no, actually, you mean this. So here you are. You've got the disclosure. It's $300 down payment. The rates are as low as 16% or whatever your bottom is. There's a little asterisk there that we'll get into. Your service contract is 12 months, 2,400 miles, and you want to say, see your dealership for additional disclosures on that because, that's a whole long, complicated contract there. But, the disclosure here at the bottom says based on a 48-month term, so you're kind of giving them the terms, $300 down payment, 16% APR, it's upon approved credit. Approved credit. So not everybody's going to get this deal. Not all borrowers qualify. Tax, title, and license, they're extra. They're not included in this. And the offer, if it's on the internet, include an expiration date. Because your ad can get shared and shared and shared and shared, and then if somebody comes into your dealership and has an ad and it's expired, and you don't have an expiration date on it, you have to honor it. Here's another deceptive ad. Again, we've got this $2,800, and then I love this one. We're going to pay off your trade, no matter what you owe. Is that really what you mean? Is that really what you mean, or are you rolling that up into the next risk? Here you go. This is really what you mean. It's after the down payment, 16%, upon approved credit, not all borrowers qualify, your tax, title, licenses are extra, offer on approved credit, offer expires, again, with an expiration date, whatever your expiration date is.
But you see really the difference between this one, especially with that top dollar for your trade-in, because we
Yes.
see that a lot, is if you're just rolling it into the next amount financed, that can be considered deceptive, right, to the average consumer who may not understand, when the actual trade-off value is less than the payoff amount. So it's really important, if you're going to use some verbiage, use verbiage like this, we'll pay top dollar. That's not specific. That's not talking about paying off your trade. It's not talking about anything, like I said, that's specific, like no matter what you owe. It's just top dollar, and it's just general enough that it can't be considered deceptive. So.
Yes, and so I'm going back to that nice little advertisement that we saw. The dealership then, a couple weeks later, came up with, hey, we're doing this trade-in event. You can look up on the internet. They gave you a link to NADA and said, we'll give you top dollar for your trade-in. So I'm like, fantastic. I'm going to get a really good deal on my son's old car. So I text him back, and I'm like, so which one do I use? Do I use good? Do I use fair? Do I use excellent? Because if I can choose, I'm going to use excellent. You got to, because you said in your ad you're going to use top dollar, and I say my car is in excellent condition, and to me it's in excellent condition, but to you it's not. What just happened? These are just some additional misleading ads that we see constantly. We'll rebuild your credit. You're only rebuilding their credit if they make their payments. So be very cautious of stating that. That's probably the one I want to take away from this slide here, is that, that then triggers additional rules. And so you don't want to get caught in that slippery slope there.
Yeah, and it doesn't detract from the main message of, if you make your payments on time, we'll help build your credit. A lot of times we're servicing credit-challenged consumers, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's a value add for them when they come to do business with you. But just make sure that from the very beginning that they understand that that's on the condition that they're making their payments on time.
Yes, yes. So now we're going to move into lead generators and influencers. And I see lead generator and influencers a lot. I actually follow a couple because I think it's really funny to see what they say. And it's just, I haven't yet reached out to them to say, wait a minute. It's not something that is difficult to do. It's fairly simple. But here's your lead generators. So know what they're saying. Are they communicating with your consumers? Or if they get a lead, are they immediately sending it to your sales team? And your sales teams are actually doing the conversation. If it is the lead generator that's doing the conversation with the consumer, are they sending you a transcript of what they're saying so that you know what they said and what they're binding you to in your deal? I think that's probably the biggest risk with that is, if they're saying something, they're binding you, they don't really care if they're binding you to something that you might not be able to do. So make sure that you can get the transcripts if that's who's doing it. I would prefer you to have them push them all to your sales team, so then you know exactly what your sales team is doing, because you've trained your sales team, you know what your sales teams are doing. So I would prefer that.
And I think this goes back just in general to good vendor due diligence. And we talk about it all the time, how dealers and businesses, and really any industry, but in ours especially, because we do deal with so many vendors, are responsible or can be held responsible for what vendors do on your behalf. Mm-hmm. So it's important that you, number one, understand what they're doing. So those are just good questions. What are your internal policies? How are your people trained? You know, what kind of communications are they going to have, you know, with my potential clients, right? Can we get a copy of those scripts? Do they use scripts? These are all very fair questions. And then also take a look at the contract that you sign with them, right? Mm-hmm. And make sure that you have protections in that contract for you as a business.
Yes, and you know, definitely make sure that the contract protects you. Additionally, you know, influencers are not infallible. They can make a mistake. It could be a mistake, but it could cost you. So just be careful with that. This here is where we're coming back to. This is an advertisement it's a sample advertisement from one of Facebook's preferred influencers for y'all. The advertisement, I know it's super small print, but it does not include the term or the APR. It has everything. I'm like, I was looking at this, I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. They got everything. And then I looked at it again, and I'm like, wait a minute. They didn't have the term or the APR. So even the people that Facebook is having you use for advertisements may not be doing it right. So you need to educate yourself, and you need to know what is going on with these advertisers and if they actually are doing it right. Here's a case where the Arizona Attorney General actually banned, and this is kind of going back to what I was talking about, is that they banned this marketing firm from advertising because they were actually using in their advertisement these urgent sales events, and they were saying things like that are right up here, that, you know, they're urgent, you know, we've got a repo sale, we've got a bankruptcy sale, you know, all of these are causing people to think that it's urgent for them to get in. They've got to get in quickly, or else the deals aren't going to be there. So the Arizona AG decided that was deceptive. So they banned this company from actually doing any kind of sales or marketing in Arizona.
And I think that the key takeaway here is, if you have 20 repossessed vehicles and you're going to have a repossessed sale event, and those are the only vehicles included in the sale, mm-hmm. That's a true statement, right?
Absolutely.
The difference is saying we're going to have this other kind of sale and every car in the lot is available, and so what you're actually advertising, the type of sale it is, doesn't match what you're actually doing. So just make sure what you're disclosing in those advertisements actually matches what you're doing.
Correct. All right, now we're going to talk to you about the UDAP with 1A and 2As. So 1A, the AGs are getting you on it, and they are saying that it is deceptive, and it is based on the FTC Act Section 5. And that is that they're stating that it is unfair or deceptive acts or practices in or affecting commerce. Well, when you're selling something, you're in commerce. So this is what they're holding their hat on. And when they get you for a UDAP, then it could be triple punitive damages. So you just don't want to go there. Under the Dodd-Frank Act, that's where the 2As come into place. If you're a larger dealership, and trigger the CFPB, this is what they're actually going under. Most of the dealerships we deal with are actually under the 1A. So understand that these are the rules that you have to apply for. And unfair and deceptive has always been something that is not well defined. So it's usually discretionary. So although the Dodd-Frank did go and define most of those terms, and even if it's an FTC dealership, I kind of applied the UDOT methodology because they did define it very, very well. The FTC also has a list of to-do and to-don'ts. I like the to-don'ts. These are some of them that they've got up there. We're only going to talk about 3 of them, which are the deceptive pricing. We've kind of talked about that. You know, deceptive pricing is when, you know, you say you're going to sell it for something and that's not really it. You know, you've got $300 and it says $300 and that's really the down payment. That's deceptive. The teaser payments we're talking about, those are also ones that were, you know, where, you know, the payments change. Don't do that. Balloon payments, the
tax payments.
I don't know why I keep flaking on that one. But it is, you know, the tax one. So if it's one of those, if it's a balloon payment or tax payments, make sure you include those because the FTC is out there. This is actually something the FTC is putting out for consumers. They are educating the consumers. The biggest thing here is the bottom left-hand side. They're telling the consumer where to go. They want the consumers to tell on you. They want to know who the bad actors are. So they're, you know, going along with the video that we didn't really see, we heard it. This is a flyer that they have, and they're really educating the consumers. So, you know, if you think you're going to be getting away with it, you may be for a little bit, and that's your risk that you're going to take, but eventually it's going to come around. The Pennsylvania AG hit a dealership and they accused them of advertising vehicles on Craigslist, and what did they do? They didn't disclose it was a dealership. That's a problem. So they went after them and they got them. Arkansas, the AG brought a lawsuit against 4 dealerships, again, for marketing. The AGs are coming after you guys. It's not a joke. This year alone, I think 18 states, AGs, I counted, had gotten dealerships on deceptive marketing practices. 18 states. That's a lot. So some best practices we want to talk about. So best practices. Make sure you understand what a trigger term is and how to use it. It's not difficult. It's the ABCs. Percent, dollar, you know, if you've got those, you've got a month or year in there, you got to disclose something else. It's really that simple. Make sure your ads are accurate. If you say it, mean it, and follow through. If you have an advertisement and it's only going to apply to a subset of your customers, don't do that. And then I think don't stack your rebates.
Yeah, and a really good example was a dealership I was at a few months ago in Houston that advertised the 0% rate, right? And it was contingent upon a really high credit score, and so I was there doing a site audit, and I asked him, I was doing deal jacket audits, and I said, everybody that I looked at is paying 22% or 19%. And I said, has anyone ever qualified? He'd been there like 20 years for 0%. And he said, no, it just gets them in the door. But they can if they had a high enough credit score, but I've just never had anyone come into my lot with that high credit score. And I said, so you're advertising that you provide the service at this rate, yet you've never actually in the history of your business provided that service at that rate. Do you think that's a little deceptive? You know, and so that was kind of the test there. So
Yeah.
just be realistic about what you're advertising and ask, yeah, I potentially could provide this, but have I ever really done it? And if you can't demonstrate it, then you probably shouldn't be advertising that you do it, right?
Yep, absolutely. Don't put your disclosures in such small print that nobody can see it, or where it's blurred out and they can't read it because it's part of the background of your website or the disclosure. Just Don't do that. That's not.
We saw
something
that
you
one
need
the
to
other
do.
day, where they did have the actual disclosures, the trigger term disclosures, but the font was white, and at the bottom of the ad, where it was picture of the car, it was white down at the bottom, and so it was kind of white on white. So I'm like, yeah, you have the terms, but you can't read it.
Yep.
So,
If it is on the internet, make sure it's in close proximity of the of what's been triggered. Don't make them click through to a disclosure page. That just, that's nobody likes that. Make sure the disclosures are clear and conspicuous. That kind of goes to the blurred text and the really small mouse print.
and that's also important to remember. Think about the ads, if you have them on your website or if you have them on Facebook, think about how those ads are going to look on a device, on a phone.
All devices.
Right, on
All
all
devices.
devices.
All
It may look,
devices.
and I frequently come across ads that it looks one way on the website, it looks fine, but when you try to view it on a phone, you lose content.
Yep. Or you're like scrolling forever. Again, best practice, if it's on the internet, put an expiration date on it. That's going to save you a ton. It doesn't take up that much more text when you use a expiration date. We're going to move into the risks. And this is where we're going to talk about your risk assessment and what we're recommending that you kind of do. So
Let's see by a show of hands. Who has written policies and procedures for advertising and marketing? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our first step.
Mm-hmm.
Is it needs to be written down. And written down for every medium that you use, whether it's radio, whether it's TV or print, or whether it's Facebook, okay? And so for number one, written, right?
Written.
Identify, who's responsible for the final approval in your business for that. Usually it comes down, and most buyer payers comes down to one person. Sometimes it's the owner. Sometimes they've hired a guy that's what he does. But identify what that workflow starts with. Does the advertising agency or company provide you some content, some boilerplate content oftentimes, and they say we're going to publish this? Who has to read it? Maybe don't just have one person look at it. Maybe have two people look at it within the context of the requirements that we sent today, and just make sure that you have a thorough approval process for each ad. So, but
Yep.
most importantly, it needs to be documented. It needs to be written.
Yeah, and exactly what you're doing, what is it you want to achieve with your ads? I know everybody wants to sell cars. That's the ultimate goal, but how do you want to sell those cars? Do you understand that entire process that goes behind it? So you kind of really have to look at it and break it down as to what you're doing. Know the channels, like Richard said, you've got to know your channels, where are they going, who are you marketing to? Who is your audience? And you also have to think your audience is also the AGs and the FTC. That's your audience too. Post-execution. This is something.
Can I jump in real
Sure,
quick
sure.
on the know who posts context? Because I do a lot of on-site work, right? And so one of the things that I've seen with social media use in the buy here, pay here industry has been, every salesman is posting. They're posting to their personal, oftentimes they're posting to the business site. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important, if you have controls in place, great. But if you don't, if you're not sure what your salespeople are posting on behalf of your business to their personal page, and because I know I've got a bunch of friends in the car business that are salesmen in the DFW area, and so their stuff comes up in my personal feed all the time, and I'm direct messaging them. I'm like, hey, you need disclosures, and they kind of think it's funny. I'm like, it's not. You're advertising on behalf of your dealership, and they're responsible for what you put out there and that content. And there's no controls in those scenarios. The dealers aren't even aware of it. So one of the things I recommend is, as part of your written policies and procedures, is also to have an internal training program, right? It's literally, it can be 20 minutes, and it says, here's what trigger terms are, here's what you can and can't, here's the ground, here's the ground rules of what we're going to allow you to say on behalf of the dealership. And then have them acknowledge that policy, something signed and written off, right? Ultimately, you're just trying to protect the business. You don't want a rogue actor saying something that's going to embarrass the business. But if you don't have you can't demonstrate that effort, that you put that effort in to train them, and then have them acknowledge that they've gone through it, then you're at a liability, right? Otherwise, it's a mistake, and then you can work with that, individual on a one-off basis for disciplinary reasons or whatever. But with no controls, you own whatever they post on your behalf. So it's really important as part of that you get the employee acknowledgement that they've been trained and they know what to do.
And also, some states have requirements.
An example, policy and procedure? Exactly. Yeah, I do. You can get my card. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, in buy here, pay here, a lot of times it's one person. Maybe you have 2 salespeople, 3 salespeople. It's not often it doesn't have to be complicated. Just something short and sweet that explains it. So, but
Absolutely.
in any organization, absolutely.
That's yeah. That's the thing. We see we go into dealerships all the time, and the owner doesn't see everything that their salespeople are doing, and that is probably one of the biggest things that is your risk. They're putting your dealership on the line.
A month ago, I was at one where the employee had set up the Facebook page for the business 3 years ago, and they left, and they had control of the Facebook page, and he was going to have to sue and he had 40,000 followers. He had grown organically over all those years, and never even thought about who has control. Am I an admin on that Facebook page? When that employee left, he lost all of that. He said, I'm either going to start over or go to court. He decided to start over. Yes, ma'am.
So are you saying that if I clearly have a written policy in place and it's signed off by my employees, and then I have this rogue employee who goes out and does something, are you saying that the AG will then not hold me as the only liability?
I can't say for sure they will or they won't, but I will say that in any compliance situation, if you can show that you have a dedication to training, and it can be demonstrated, you've documented, you have a dedication to written policies and procedures that outline how to do things the right way, right? And then you have that culture of compliance when you're within your business. It goes a long way. Number one, just by setting those expectations with your employees, you decrease the likelihood that someone's going to do that. That's number one, because a lot of times they just don't know what they can and can't post. So when you set that expectation, you minimize the risk right there, the number of instances. So there's no guarantees, but it always goes a long way in any type of investigation or any type of litigation to show that you have dedicated some efforts to controls. And we talk about the controls here, but then and Kelly will talk about the post-execution, that you have some audit functions in place as well.
So, and one of the things that will be in your social media policy is also when an employee does go rogue, what do? Are you writing them up? Are you terminating them? So if you want the AG to stay off your back, make sure you have counseled them, you have it in writing, that you have said that this is not acceptable, and if they continue to do it, make that decision and get them off your lot, because you don't want to lose your lot. Okay, so does that answer, Diane? Okay. So for post-execution, post-execution is something that I like to do because it then goes and talks about, was your ad successful? Did it bring in the sales that you wanted? Was it effective? If it wasn't effective, what can you change? Make a change to your advertisement that will bring in the sales. And if you don't do a post-execution of your advertisement, then you actually need to, you need to do that. Here's an example of risk assessment. So, and it's basic. I just kind of put some things up there. Know your regulations. We were in a session yesterday, and they were talking about, if you're doing videos on the internet, that triggers ADA. So I put ADA up there. So you have to make sure that there's all kinds of rules with that. that you need to make sure. But these are kind of basic things that in your risk assessment you kind of need to take a look at. You know, do you have a social media policy? Risk rate them. You know, is it good? Is it, you know, y'all said you didn't have one, so that would be really high on my list here. If you have one, then it moves to a moderate. You know, you've got something in place, you're using it, you're working it, you're making sure everything's in place. Best practices, know your state laws. Ensure your policy covers, you know, social media. You know, you've got a code of conduct that the employee signs, because then if you do have to go and have that conversation with them, they have actually signed a code of conduct with you and what you're actually wanting them to do for advertising for your business. Know your advertising channels. Understand your customer base. If you don't understand your customer base, you can't make your advertisements that great. Conduct a risk assessment. Do due diligence on your third parties. You know, do due diligence on your salespeople. Ensure third parties know your rules that are in your industry.
Because a lot of times we've seen that where we see really great website providers and website designers that know this much about compliance.
Yep.
And so the website is appealing, it's engaging, it's bringing in customers, and it's all kinds of wrong when it comes to compliance. So a lot of times you can have a great vendor in that space for their technology, but they may not know what the consumer finance requirements are for you as a player in that space. So.
Yep. Ultimately, you're responsible. You are responsible. Have a checklist, like Richard said. Know the channels you're marketing on, and have a qualified third party come and take a look at some of your advertisements. It's really simple to do. Doesn't take very long, and it's easy to do. ABCs. We're going to go back to those. $, percent, terms. Need disclosures. Make sure your advertisement is clear, that they understand it, and you know, college students can understand it. And we all know they're the smartest people in the world, right? You know, the direct contact. Make sure that the direct contact, you understand that that's also part of advertising. We're going to leave you today with this thought: there's no safety net in the "but everybody does it this way" mindset. So if you think everybody's doing it, they're not. So we'll open up to, we've got a few minutes for questions. If you guys want to.
Yeah, we have a few minutes. Any questions? Anyone have a question for, oh boy. Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
I believe they provided you a link to it. That'll be here. If not, you can get a card and we can just, I can email it directly to you. Yep. Yes, sir.
It depends on the medium. It all depends on the medium. You know, if you got to get a magnifying glass out, it's too small.
The rule is basically clear and conspicuous, and
Yeah.
don't make the font size so much smaller than the original statement that it's almost impossible. If it's a third of the original statement, then that's too much. Maybe if it's 75%, there's not an exact rule. But would a reasonable person looking at this say, oh yeah, you know, it's like in the example we provided, if you notice the asterisk font was smaller, but it was still clear and conspicuous and easy for us to read. Yes, ma'am.
So how does this apply to like ABC Business Development Center employees who are potential?
Are they negotiating a specific contract terms with the consumer at that point, or are they just trying to get them in? Well, the same rules would apply if you are talking about a specific amount or rate, right? Or you know, right, I think it's specific contract terms, then you would have to make the same kind of disclosures. If you're just trying to say, hey, come on in, we've got some great cars here, we noticed you were in the market for that, that's, you know, that you're not talking about a specific contract. Yes, ma'am.
We do online finance tools. So they are talking about a specific card, like they are talking financing and documents and things like that. Do those finance tools need disclosure?
I would have to specifically look at, is there an application online? I would have to read that application. I would have to read what's being communicated specifically to the consumer throughout that process before I could really say. Yeah. Example. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is a real world issue.
great example,
It's
too.
not, it is not one of those hypothetical,
Yeah.
everyone just needs to be scared, but we really can't find any enforcement actions in the last couple of years. They're everywhere. She said, 18 states. The FTC's had some pretty significant operations, so it is a real concern. And also, I mean, I like to flip the script a little bit and say, do I want to be a truthful, honest business person with my customers? Do I ever want anyone to feel like I was unfair with them, right? Someone to walk away and say, you didn't say that at the time of sale, and someone has buyer's remorse, and you never want a customer to have buyer's remorse because you felt like maybe you weren't fully upfront about what you disclosed. So,
Yeah.
so that's another part. You want your customers to come back and come back and come back and have them feel like that you're always being honest with them, right? When it comes to the terms of the deal.
Yep.
One more back here, and then.
So if you're advertising the down payment and the payments, the APR, the term, I've scrolled through my demographic Craigslist, nobody's advertising the term and the APR.
Go back to that previous slide where it says everybody's doing.
My question is, can you put a range in there? Can you put $500,000 down payment vehicle and then a credit, or can you not put any of that in?
We'd have to sit down and go through the specifics of that ad. I mean, I just want to see everything that was on the screen first before I said it. Because there are flavors, you know.
You can say, there's nothing wrong with saying, down payments as low as, but when you say that, you have to make sure that it applies to the most of your consumers. So if you say $200, then that $200 down payment has to apply to the majority of your consumers.
If 80% of your consumers are required to have $1,000
Yeah.
down, then that potentially
So,
could be considered deceptive.
you can do something like that.
All right, I think we're going to wrap it up here.
Yeah.
I think we have another speaker coming in that's going to need the room here shortly. So I'd like to thank everybody. Kelly?
Thank you very much.
Thank
Richard?
you very much.